Knee pain can occur from many different factors, but there's one in particular that I don't see that often discussed. That being the relationship between how your knees interact with each joint on either side of it, your hips and your ankles. Now, is that to say that muscular strength around the knee matters? Yes. Does range of motion throughout the knee joint matter? Yes. Are these the only factors that contribute to long-term knee health? No. And in this video, you are going to learn why and how the hip, knee, and ankle all work with one another to improve knee function and overall health. So I think when it comes to strengthening the knees and the tissues around the knees, a muscle that is often forgot about is this guy, our hamstrings. A lot of people tend to have a quad focus, and for good reasons. They are a very important muscle that contributes to knee stability, but there's also another muscle that certainly contributes to that as well, which is the hamstring group itself. You don't only have one hamstring, you have multiple. So the first exercise that we are going through is a hamstring rollout. So you can use a foam roller, you can also use a basketball, a medicine ball, anything that you can kind of roll to and from you. And what we're doing to start with in this position is just bring ourselves up into a bridge position. As you can see here with my hands, I just have them on my lower back because ideally when we go up into that bridge position, we just want to be mindful that we're not excessively going into a lordosis. So I just have my hands there as feedback just to keep the lumbar relatively neutral, which is going to be a slight curve through there. And then we are going to start to kick the foam roller away from us. And ideally, as we're going through that, we're not allowing the hips themselves to drop too much. They will drop because it is moving further away from you, so you won't be able to keep the hips entirely fixed. But as best as you can, see if you can keep the hips raised, and this is going to provide a lot of feedback into the hamstrings, as well as it's a nice way to create some length through the quad and the hip flexor muscle group. I personally really like to use these in my warm-up just as a way to kind of prime the hamstrings, as well as just bring a lot of blood flow and circulation in through the legs and the knees. And then when I start to get into my more strength-oriented work, I've kind of primed that tissue for it. So I'd suggest working anywhere between about 8 to 12 reps here. Take your time with it. Think about 3 to 4 seconds going out, 3 to 4 seconds coming back in. And I assure you, as you can see by the look on my face here, you will definitely be feeling the hamstrings. So for this next exercise, grab yourself a small foam roller, or you can even use just a small yoga block. That would work here as well. And we're gonna start to take that hamstring tension that we were working on in the previous exercise, and we're gonna really start to emphasize linking that into the pelvis. Because as I mentioned in the introduction, when it comes to knee health and knee function, stability, and just creating long-term health, we'll say through the knees, we wanna make sure that the pelvis is involved in that. The pelvis is a really important joint. It's really big. It's kind of what links our upper and lower body and kind of acts as the midpoint between there. So we want to get used to rotating, hinging, and providing feedback through the tissues of the leg and the pelvis with one another. And this is a great exercise to do so. We're providing some internal rotation into the pelvis, which is often a function that a lot of people tend not to have that good of range of motion in, because we're going to be taking the glutes and the hamstrings through a lengthened tension here. It's going to start to work on that relationship of how we can have the glutes and hamstrings connected as we start to go through a really important function, which is hip extension. So as you can see, as I'm standing up here, I'm just trying to keep my knee relatively fixed in space. I'm not letting that knee just extend where I'd be losing hamstring tension. Ideally, I'm kind of loading into the heel. You can see I lift my foot as I have my hand kind of on my hip bone there. And that is going to be really what provides that level of weight distribution through that lead leg. It's really going to challenge that lead leg. And we want to try to keep some of that weight as we slowly start to come up through that important phase of hip extension. You will likely feel your hamstrings, glutes, adductors probably all get challenged here. And I recommend just having a gentle kind of side pressure going into the tool of your choice, and probably work through anywhere between about 8 to 12 reps again. You can incorporate this into your warm-up routine, or if you wanted to take it to the next level, you can start to add some load to it. But more often than not, when I'm working with people, I find that just going through body weight with this exercise tends to be enough. So what good is a knee health program if we don't target the quads? So we have arrived. We've done a couple exercises for the hamstrings, and now we're gonna start to get into some specific knee extension work. That's not to say that we don't want the hamstrings and glutes to some degree still involved here, but you can see I'm just standing on 2 plates, and really what I'm trying to be mindful of here is that shin angle. So what you can see is that as I'm coming down, that shin angle is just gonna slightly start to increase, or how you can kind of picture this is my knee is gonna gradually start to shift over my toes. And when I get to that bottom position, all I'm doing is just emphasizing or bringing a little bit more weight to that lead leg. That's gonna, again, really prioritize where we're gonna orient that push from. And then I'm just starting to kind of lean or fall back with my upper body. But again, look at my knee. I'm just not letting my knee kind of loosely extend there. I'm really trying to maintain integrity through the musculature of the leg and the pelvis, and just letting my upper body kind of move back relative to that. This is an absolute leg killer if you go through this tempo that you see I am here. Again, 3 to 4 seconds coming down, 3 to 4 seconds coming back up. You can work this with body weight. You can add load with a dumbbell on each side. Just be mindful that the upper body isn't collapsing or compressing as you go through it. So up until this point, we have worked on a lot of corrective work, kind of building the connections between these 3 primary joints of the hip, the knee, and the ankle. So now we got to start to add some movement to that. We don't just want to stay stale and let that tension just kind of sit there. We want to think about how we can add some rhythm and fluidity to the motion. And what we're going to do is just some jumping here. So all I'm doing is I'm just kind of hopping around here to start with, just kind of getting a feel for what it feels like for my feet to kind of reflexively bounce off the floor. And you can see my knees here just kind of pulsing into that shin angle. So we're kind of taking all the corrective work that we have done up until this point, and we're just starting to apply it in a more reflexive way. And there's really no better way to do that than through some form of jumping. Now, all we're starting to do here is adding some directional momentum to it. So I'm just gonna start to move horizontally, jumping forwards, jumping backwards, but I'm still trying to keep kind of that springy type motion and just being mindful that my feet are just reflexively rebounding kind of off the floor. You can see with my arms here, I'm also kind of driving and pumping those up as well. And that's just allowing my spine and my whole upper body to get involved in the motion. I start to move into jumping side to side. It just adds the frontal plane dimension to it, which is a plane of motion that a lot of people just really don't train that much. So make sure that if you do any form of jumping or really any form of movement training, to add this frontal plane of motion to it. That's gonna really start to get the pelvis involved. It's gonna start to add more rotation. And it's just gonna challenge your body and your tissues in a different way. So now that we've worked through some of the reflexive elements with those jumping pogos with 2 legs, let's start to add a single leg variation to that. So as you can see here, I'm still trying to keep that same sort of reflexive property, but I'm just starting to incorporate the upper body more into it. I'm letting the arms start to kind of pump and rotate the upper body. And I'm just making sure that I'm staying light on my feet while I'm just going between those switches back and forth from side to side. I'll even add in this exercise in between sets of strength work, as I find that it just adds a nice rhythmic component to my routine and just keeps my body kind of feeling fluid and loose as I start to incorporate tension into it. And what we get into next here is one that is no stranger to this channel. I feel we've covered this one a couple times at this point, and that is the switch lunge. And you can see I'm kind of rotating around or creating a slight matrix with it. I'm not just doing it in one spot. I'm trying to use my hips kind of as a point of leverage so that I can rotate myself kind of almost in a little clock-like fashion. And I'm trying to spend as little time as possible at that top position. Really, I'm just trying to touch, I come back down, and then I'm just going to rebound out of that bottom position, ideally in a rhythmic way, where the tension is just kind of being loaded, and then I'm springing out of that, quick touch at the top, and then just cycling between those 2 positions. If you guys have done these before, then you know that they are an absolute leg killer, but a fantastic exercise to incorporate the hips, knees, and ankles into an exercise while dynamically starting to rotate and incorporate the upper body as well. So this last exercise is a little bit more advanced because we're adding a weight and pendulum for us to kind of work around. So if you haven't done much pendulum work with a kettlebell or a dumbbell, then you may want to start there with 2 feet and then you can progress to this single leg version. But if you do have some competency in that, then this is another great exercise to work on deceleration and how to kind of absorb momentum to use it to step back with. So if you play basketball, or even if you are just someone who needs to quickly stop, you're just going through your day-to-day life and all of a sudden you gotta take a quick stop, this is gonna be the kind of exercise that is gonna allow you and your tissues to understand how to do so in a smooth way and ideally around some form of rhythm. So what we can see at play here is on that step forward, that shin angle being created, but I'm trying to absorb that momentum actually more into my pelvis. So I'm letting the shin angle get created, but then I'm receiving momentum back into the hip, where I'm gonna start to load some of the posterior chain tissues. And then once those posterior chain tissues are loaded, I can then use that to step back with, and that's what I'm going to allow myself to maintain when I start to move into extension. I would recommend starting light with these, like 10 to 15 pounds on the high end. I went decently heavy on these, but you do have to understand how to maintain some integrity in the upper body, specifically through the shoulders and the rib cage. But this is a fantastic exercise to work on linking those elements of deceleration through the lower body all the way up to shoulder stability in extension. And all these exercises help to improve knee strength, stability, but most importantly, work on that integration piece between how the ankle and hip need to work alongside it. So give these exercises a shot and let me know how it went for you down in the comment section below. You may be surprised just how challenging some of these exercises can be. Anyways, that is going to wrap this week's video on really just improving your knee health and I would say just overall lower body connection. If you did find this video valuable, you can do all the YouTube things where you like, subscribe. If you're into this type of content, I'll post a video here and here if you want to watch more, and I will catch you guys in the next one. Peace.